Hey there, my name is Nicholas Muir, and March is coming up. March is filled with all different things. There's St. Patrick's Day, the NCAA March Madness Tournament, and the Oscars. Speaking of the Oscars, I love movies. I love a wide variety of different genres of movies, and I wanted to talk about one of them, if not the most anticipated movie of 2022. If you don't know what I'm talking about Matt Reeves' noir-inspired superhero movie, The Batman. While we could talk about a lot of different things, such as the choice to cast Robert Pattinson as Batman, the thought process to go forward with a noir-styled story, or how this is Colin Farrell, what I want to specifically talk about is what could become the greatest Batman villain on the movie screen, Paul Dano as Edward Nashton, also known as the Riddler. Now, you're probably wondering, what? How? Who is this guy? Well, for starters, hi, I'm Nick, and I'd like to tell you my reasoning for this. 1. This does not mean I don't like the other Batman villains on the screen. Heath Ledger obviously gave a great performance in The Dark Knight. He won Best Supporting Actor, for God's sake. And say what you want about the movie, but Tom Hardy as Bane in The Dark Knight Rises was iconic, in my opinion. Now, for the criteria of this list. I have 3 reasons why I think Paul Dano's Riddler might become the greatest villain to Batman's movie portrayal. Those 3 categories are design, performance/inspirations, and the actor himself. But enough chit-chat. Let's dive on in and see if you agree with me. Number 1. Design. On October 17, 2019, which is almost 3 years ago by this point, The Hollywood Reporter's Boris Kitt announced that Paul Dano was casted as the Riddler. In an interview with Fandango All Access, host Naz Perez said, "This is the first time we're seeing the Riddler as the primary villain in almost 27 years. Last time we saw the Riddler in a Batman movie, he looked like this." So the real question is, how did we go from this to this? Well, Matt Reeves stated that one of the inspirations for his Riddler was the infamous killer known as the Zodiac Killer. Oh, whoops. How did that get there? All joking aside, here's a real picture of the Zodiac Killer. Now, if you put a picture of Paul Dano's Riddler in the middle of Jim Carrey's from Batman Forever and the Zodiac Killer, you can see that he leans more in appearance likewise to the Zodiac Killer than the green spandex pajamas that Jim Carrey wears throughout the Batman Forever movie. In an interview with Empire magazine, Paul Dano even says that he kind of prefers this DIY element to the costume than the more fantastical things that you'd see in previous movies. Dano continued on by saying, "The DIY element you're talking about was actually scarier to me than more sophisticated or composed designs we might have played with." He said when wearing the costume that he felt powerful and that it spoke to you and your body in a weird way. In addition to that, I want to talk about just how different this looks from all the other iterations of the Riddler, and Batman villains in general. We've seen many different adaptations of Batman over the years, with many different levels of interpretation and faithfulness to the comics. But if you look at it, the Riddler in this movie is absolutely different from anything we've ever seen before. If you look at the original TV series and the 1966 movie, that's probably where you get the closest thing to a carbon copy design of what the comics were designing for these villains. Then, in the 1980s and 90s, when directors like Joel Schumacher and Tim Burton took over, we got more of a darker and gothic aesthetic with Tim Burton, and then in movies like Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, directed by Joel Schumacher, the color and pizzazz, if you want to say, got brought up a bit more. Then, At the turn of the century, Christopher Nolan took his own crack at the Batman franchise with his Dark Knight trilogy. In those movies, we saw things that would be more bent in reality. Like, the villains, they didn't look like these things that you wouldn't just see pop out of nowhere, but they looked like they could be real people. Like, the Joker wore war paint, and Bane looked more like a terrorist per se. But even if they looked like real people in this case, they still looked a bit faithful to the comics. The Joker still wore his purple and green getup with his white face paint. And even Bane, it's more of a stretch, but he still kind of has the similar vibe to his wrestler getup in a way. And that's why I love this Riddler so much. He's like nothing we've ever seen before. In most adaptations of Batman, whether it be comics or games or shows or movies, the Riddler always has like this green suit with question marks all over it, or he usually has a bowler hat. This looks nothing like that. This is a completely new, and it's not really original, but for the Riddler himself, an original design. And they always tell you to stand out amongst the crowd, and I think they nailed it perfectly with this design getup for the Riddler. He looks nothing like past iterations of himself, and it's something that takes you by surprise. They say truth is stranger than fiction. I think in this case, taking the design of the Zodiac Killer and providing that to a Batman villain makes this a much scarier and much more interesting villain than just the original concept of the Riddler himself. Number 2. Performance and inspirations. If you saw Paul Dano's Riddler and said, "Hey, this looks familiar," well, you weren't alone. Like previously said, Matt Reeves wanted his Riddler to invoke the same feeling as the real-life Zodiac Killer. Reeves said, "He's killing very prominent figures in Gotham, and they are the pillars of society. These are supposedly legitimate figures. It begins with the mayor, and then escalates from there." According to this article by Anthony Borelli, the similarities go deeper than appearance. Borelli writes, "The Riddler taunts the police with sadistic killings in various writings, and this fits the Zodiac's MO. Yes, riddles and coded messages are to be expected when dealing with the Riddler, but the manner in which they are done in this film is darker than anything previously attributed to this character on film." In Batman Forever, the Riddler's last movie in the spotlight, we got riddles like these. In The Batman, we're getting riddles like these. Wow. Yeah, definitely darker. Another thing Borelli stated in the article, the Riddler taunts the police with sadistic killings and various writings, and that fits the Zodiac's MO. Here's a picture of the Riddler's cryptogram in the Batman, and here's the Zodiac Killer's in real life. He also taunts the Batman directly with his letter, basically saying, "Come and find me." It's very similar to how the Zodiac Killer sent letters taunting the police. You can see in this particular letter from the Zodiac Killer, he calls out the police saying, "You could have caught me, but you were too busy basically running races to do your jobs." The Zodiac Killer may be one of the main inspirations for Paul Dano's Riddler, but when doing research for this video, I found there to be a lot of similarities between the Batman's Riddler and John Doe from David Fincher's Seven. Apparently I'm not alone in this thought process either. The main thing that got me thinking this was the line director Matt Reeves said in his interview with MovieMaker.com. When talking about the Riddler's murders, Reeves said, "In the wake of the murders, he reveals the ways in which these people were not everything they said they were." Now, if you haven't seen Seven, spoilers. John Doe is a serial killer murdering people based off of the concept of the 7 deadly sins. However, when confronted about this, Doe justifies the killings as ridding the world of people who invoke these cardinal sins, similar to how the Riddler is killing those who are hiding secrets from the public. When watching the Fandango All Access video, I started reading the comments, and some people made some very good points. Some of the points made were that the film incorporates things like Seven and the Zodiac Killer, especially how the Riddler executes his plan, kind of being the necessary evil that he is for Gotham. The Riddler doesn't want any more lies in Gotham, and to quote the Wikipedia from Seven, Doe wants to shock the world out of its state of apathy. The similarities don't stop there, though. I also see similarities in how both John Doe and Edward Nashton are caught. In the trailer for The Batman, we see the police run into a cafe and arrest Nashton. The weird thing is how calm he is. There isn't any fighting or trying to get away. It's like he wanted to get caught. This is very similar to John Doe in Seven, who walks into the police station to turn himself in to Detectives Mills and Somerset. The last similarity between the Riddler and John Doe is the use of personal things to the main characters. The easier of the two to dissect is John Doe, because the movie has been out for over 25 years. And I will reiterate, if you haven't seen Seven, this will be a major spoiler. One of the most quotable lines in film history comes from Seven. In the movie, Brad Pitt's Detective Mills asks Morgan Freeman's Detective Somerset, "What's in the box?" Last warning for the spoiler, it was revealed that John Doe embodied the sin of envy and killed/decapitated Mills's pregnant wife. Mills becomes wrath by killing John Doe in a fit of rage. So how does this relate to Batman? Well, in an interview with /Film, producer Dylan Clark said, Matt is interested in pushing the character to his emotional depths and shaking him to his core. I think we've seen this a couple times in the trailers. We see Bruce Wayne standing in the center of a bunch of messages, one saying, "The sins of my father." In another instance, we see a child who just lost their father almost be killed by getting hit with a car. Finally, we see a door that says, "Where it all began," in green paint. What I think this all means is that the Riddler knows who the Batman is and is trying to make him relive his traumatic events of the past, specifically the murder of his parents. My hypothesis is that this will be the closest Batman has ever come to killing someone on screen. Matt Reeves wants to shake him to his core and push the emotional depths of the character. What would push him further than breaking his moral code? The door is the most intriguing part to me. Will it be a full reenactment of the murder of the Wayne parents? Will it be the Riddler's beginning and Batman somehow caused it? We'll have to wait until March 4th to find out. Number 3. The actor. Now, when it came to the other two sections of this video, I had more evidence on why I thought the Riddler would become the greatest Batman villain on screen. He had a fantastic design, and he embodied performances like Kevin Spacey in Seven and the Zodiac Killer in real life, which were terrifying in both instances. This section is more of just a personal thing for me. It's just more about Paul Dano in general. The thing about Paul Dano in this role is it reminds me a lot of him when he played the preacher Eli in the 2007 film There Will Be Blood. In that film, like I said, he plays a preacher and he controls these crowds of people at his church with this charisma and intensity in his sermons. While it's not to the same intensity in the Batman, I see very similar ways in which the Riddler says his riddles. For example, when he says, "If you are justice, do not lie. What is the price for your blind eye?" It's kind of like he's saying a sermon in general. He has a charisma about him that commands respect, and you want to keep listening. And I don't think everyone can do that. And seeing how Paul Dano has done a role like this before, I think it was the perfect casting choice. But honestly, that's it. Between those three things, the design of the Riddler, the performance and inspirations behind him, and just how I feel about Paul Dano in general as an actor and his casting in this role, I think the Riddler could become one of the best on-screen movie villains from a Batman movie we've ever seen. But that's just my opinion. I hope I did a good job trying to convince you to see it that way. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I love talking about movies and music, and I hope to do more videos like this one and different ones soon. So stay tuned. Take care. Bye-bye.